Book 6. Phoebe returns to Hong Kong. It was very odd at home, and it had been odd for several days. Phoebe was aware that everybody was a bit tense and just a little bit stressed. Even her mum and dad were a bit niggly with each other. Phoebe knew better than to interfere and just tried to keep out of everyone's way. Even though it was cold outside, she stayed out as long as possible, riding her little red trike round the garden or meeting her friends in the park. "Hi, Billy," she said gloomily one morning. "Hi, Phoebe," said Billy, but then added, "What's wrong? You look really fed up." "You'd be fed up too," said Phoebe. "Everyone at home is just rushing around and getting tetchy." "I wouldn't mind," she went on, "but I have no idea what's going on." "Do you mean they haven't told you?" said Billy. "Told me what?" said Phoebe. Then she added even more grumpily, "I seem to be the only one who's in the dark here." "You're all going to Hong Kong for Christmas," said Billy. "It sounds like it will be amazing." But almost before he had finished speaking, Phoebe was pedalling off on her little red trike as fast as she could. "Sorry, Mrs. Biggins," she yelled, as she narrowly avoided running over her toes. "Sorry, Mr. Postman," she yelled again, as she nearly sent all the letters flying. She burst in through the garden gate, jumped off her little red trike and dashed indoors. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded crossly to her mum. "Tell you what, darling?" said her mum sweetly. "That we're going to Hong Kong," said Phoebe. "Ah," said her mum. "That was going to be a surprise for you. But how did you find out?" "Billy told me," said Phoebe. "He overheard you talking to his dad." But then she forgot how cross she was and started to get excited at the thought of going to see all her family in Hong Kong. "Wow," she said, jumping up and down. "This is going to be so cool." "Good," said her mum. "So now you can get on and pack your own things." Then she added, "It's always stressful packing to go away." "Don't I know it?" said Phoebe under her breath, but fortunately her mum didn't hear. "Mum," called Phoebe a little while later, "can I have a bigger suitcase?" "What on earth are you taking with you?" exclaimed her mum. "I need to take my friends with me," explained Phoebe. A little while later, and after a lot of heaving and squeezing and struggling, her dad, who'd been called in to help, said, "It's no use, Phoebes. There's only room for one cuddly toy." But as soon as the words were out of his mouth, he said, "OK then, we'll put another one in our suitcase somehow," because he knew how much his Phoebe loved her friends, and also because he found it hard to say no to his daughter. Phoebe lay awake for hours that night, wondering how to choose which of her gang, who were called Fog, to leave behind. It was Foxy who made the decision. "You take Puss and Rabbit," he said. "I'll stay here and look after your little red trike." "Well, OK then," said Phoebe a little uncertainly. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" "Just go," said Foxy, and he winked at Puss and Rabbit. Eventually everything was packed and weighed, and then repacked and reweighed. Trains were caught, and last-minute presents were bought in duty-free before they all settled into their seats. Phoebe cuddled Rabbit and Puss and finally slipped into a deep sleep, where she dreamed about her little red trike and Foxy flying alongside the plane. Finally, she opened her eyes and gave a huge yawn. "Where are we?" she said to her mum sleepily. "We're just about to land in Hong Kong," said her mum. "Look over there. You can see all the tall buildings." Phoebe was about to say that she'd seen them before, but just then they landed with a bump, and she could feel the plane slowing down and then taxiing to the airport terminal. The next few hours were the usual pandemonium when they came to Hong Kong. There were tears and hugs and handshakes, and, as always with the family, everyone seemed to be talking at once. After a while, Phoebe and Rabbit and Puss asked if they could go and play in the park next to her great auntie's flats. Her Uncle Bosley offered to take her down, as he was also bored with all the adult noise and just wanted to kick his football around. Phoebe was sitting on a bench when someone said, very close behind her, "Hi, Phoebes." Startled, she turned round, and there to her amazement was Foxy, and he was sitting as cool as a cucumber on a little red trike. What are you doing here?" stammered Phoebe. "Well," said Foxy, "we didn't want to miss out on all the fun." But before he could continue, his phone rang. "Wei," he said. Then after listening for a while, "Ho ho, go daylight gong." "Where are we off to now?" said Phoebe, much to the amazement of Rabbit and Puss. Then she exclaimed, "Paw has been teaching me some Cantonese, and Foxy said we're on our way." "Hop on the trike," commanded Foxy, "and I'll explain as we go." The four friends all hopped on and started pedalling around and around the little park. Phoebe could see Bosley nodding off on a bench. Suddenly they found themselves rising high above the tall flats. As they were swooping over the harbour, Foxy explained, "There's a little boy who's lost his mummy and daddy, and I said we would help to try and find them. Besides," he added, "there are some things here that I'd like to show you." Suddenly Phoebe shouted, "Oh, wow, what's that over there?" "That's Disneyland," said Foxy, "and I'm sure you'll be going there on this holiday." "Cool," said Phoebe, because she'd heard her uncle say it. "Look over there to your right," said Foxy. "There's the airport where you landed just a few hours ago." As the little red trike swooped over the mountains, Phoebe said, "What's this place called?" "This is Lantau Island," said Foxy. Then he added, "Hold on tight, we're going down." Phoebe's, Rabbit's and Pussy's eyes were suddenly as wide as they'd ever been, for there, right in front of them, was the biggest, shiniest and fattest bronze statue they'd ever seen. Even Foxy was impressed. "Wow," he said, "I've read about it and seen pictures, but this is just the biggest Buddha I've ever seen." Fogg was sitting on the little red trike just by the entrance to the Polin Monastery when Foxy said, "OK, this is going to be very hard because there are so many people around. The little boy's mummy and daddy are over there by the information hut." Phoebe looked over and saw the daddy pacing up and down while his wife was sitting on a stool sobbing. Suddenly she said to the others, "I think I have an idea." The others followed her gaze and could see that she was looking at the long flight of steps which led up to the big bronze statue. "I want to go up there," she said, "and I'm sure the little boy would too," she added. Then she said, "Why don't Foxy and Rabbit stay here on the little red trike and make sure Mummy and Daddy don't go too far? Meanwhile, I'll take Puss and go up the steps to the statue." The others were about to say something, but before they could, Phoebe was off and running as fast as her legs could carry her, and Puss. After a little while, Phoebe began to puff. "How far have we come?" she panted. "We've done 134 steps, said Puss, still managing to grin. Then he added a bit smugly, "That's just halfway." Although sums was not Phoebe's best subject, her heart sank. "So we've got another 134 to go," she frowned. Then she added, But we've got to keep going and find the little boy. And with that, Phoebe and Puss started off the steps once more. As they got higher and higher, the statue seemed to get bigger and bigger until it was towering over them. They reached the last step, and Phoebe and Puss collapsed into a heap on the ground. Both of them were gulping for air. But as Phoebe lay there looking up at the statue, she was sure she saw it wink and nod over to the left. Phoebe shook her head and decided she must have imagined it, but she jumped up straight away. "Come on, Puss," she said. "I think I know where the little boy is." They went over to the side where Phoebe thought the big Buddha had nodded, and there, sure enough, standing on his own was a little boy about Phoebe's own age. He was just looking all around him and didn't seem in the slightest bit worried. "Hello, little boy," said Phoebe. "Oh, hi," said the little boy. And then seeing that Phoebe was still panting, he said, "Are you okay? Can I help?" "Actually, it's you I've come to help," said Phoebe. "Your mummy and daddy are at the bottom, and they're so upset because they think they've lost you." "Ay-ya," said the little boy. "I told them I wanted to come up here." Then he added, "They never listened to me." Phoebe laughed. "I know the feeling," she said. But then she added, "We'd better be getting back down though, otherwise they will call for the police to look for you as well." Phoebe and the little boy set off back down the 268 steps, and on the way they discovered that both of them were partly Chinese and partly English. "That's why you said, 'Ay-ya,'" exclaimed Phoebe. "My mum and dad say it all the time." Just then they got to the bottom, and Foxy and Rabbit rushed over to meet them. "What a clever little girl," said the little boy's mum. "Thank you so much for bringing him back." Then she added, "He's so naughty, he always goes off exploring on his own." Phoebe looked over at Fog, and they just winked at her, and Puss had the biggest grin ever. "Happy to help," said Phoebe, "but I'd better be going back to my own mummy and daddy now." "Bye-bye, little boy," she shouted as she pedalled away. But before she could hear his reply, they were already far above the temple and far above the people, and they could see the lights of Hong Kong Island in the distance. Soon they were swooshing back down to the park, where her Uncle Bosley was just waking up from his snooze on the bench. "We'd better be going back up to the family," he said with a yawn. Then he added, "What have you been up to?" Phoebe was about to tell him all about the Buddha, but then she caught Foxy's eye. "Oh, nothing much," she said casually. "Just a bit of exploring." The end. And this is a picture of all your family in Hong Kong in 2016. There's Sai Bu Kao Fu, there's Kao Gung, there's Jung Gung, there's Kao Po, Dai Bu Kao Fu, and Yi Po. Night night, Phoebe. Night night, Summer.